Hi, everyone. Welcome. We will give people a moment to jump on and get started shortly. Thanks so much for being here. And we do have the chat box open if you want to say a quick hello, say where you're joining us from today, your connection to Safe Routes to School. You should be able to do so in the chat box. And thanks, Diane, for starting us off. I see Michael from Fort Worth. Hello, thanks for being here. Baton Rouge. Noah, hi, nice to see you. I'll be talking about you a little bit later. So thanks for joining us from from Greensboro. Um, so yeah, Portland, Louisville, uh, Maryland. I'm a Marylander, so nice to see the Marylanders on today. Alaska, Schuylkill County, PA, Palo Alto, Texas, North Dakota, Springfield, Missouri, Virginia. Nicole, I'll talk about you a little bit later too. Hi, hope things are well in Atlanta. Awesome. So continue to introduce yourselves in the chat. I always just like seeing who is joining us from where. So it's nice to see, yeah, the range of people who, yeah, who are at our webinars and who want to dive into this topic today. I see some Colorado folks as well. Thank you all for being here. Chicago, another Marylander, great. Hawaii, I wish I was in Hawaii right now. It's a chilly day here in DC, so any sort of warmth would be welcome right now. All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. And today we are talking all about partnerships between Safe Routes to School and colleges and universities. And I'm super excited to talk about this topic. We're just kind of, going to dive into what these types of partnerships look like. But we're really excited to, just bring this topic to you and explore, how Safe Routes and academic institutions can work together. So before we get started, for those of you who might not be familiar with Safe Routes to School and our partnership, we are the Safe Routes Partnership, and we're a national organization working to advance safe walking and rolling, both to schools and also everyday destinations, like parks and grocery stores, libraries, just places where people go on a daily basis. And our goal is to improve the health and well-being of people of all backgrounds, races, abilities, disabilities, income levels, and building healthy, thriving communities for everyone. So for those of you who are new, welcome. For those of you who have been with us for a while, it's nice to see you. Thanks for being here. And like I mentioned, feel free to jump on, say hello in the chat box, let us know where you're coming from. I'm Corey, I'm a program and engagement manager, and I'm based in Washington, D.C., but I work with Safe Routes practitioners from across the country. So yeah, again, thanks so much for being here. A few housekeeping issues before we get started. We are recording this webinar, so if you missed anything, don't worry, I'll send out a link afterwards along with the survey. Also, sometimes people drop links to different resources into the chat box. We'll make sure to capture those and send those out in a resource list after the webinar as well. And again, the chat box is open for you all to, share back and forth between the session. We also have the Q&A box open if you have any questions. It would be great to put questions in the Q&A box just so we can easily see the questions. Sometimes they get lost in a long chat. So if you could try to keep questions in the Q&A box and then just any sort of general chatter and resources in the chat box, that would be great. And we will try to get to you throughout the session. There are also going to be a few links that are embedded in the presentation that'll also be shared out after the webinar is over. So any of the links from the presentation slides, you'll have access to those as well. So don't feel like you need to, scramble and rush to get all the resources. We'll make sure that you get what you need. So hopefully you won't worry about that. Okay, so to get started, I wanted to first, just highlight this resource we've been talking about that we created with with our partners at Colorado Department of Transportation. We created this, I guess, a few years ago now. It's our community engagement guide. So if you're not familiar with this resource, this is a guide that helps, it outlines a community engagement framework and highlights some community engagement best practices, including some guiding questions for each section. It features a lot of really great Colorado programs, since this is our, Colorado Safe Routes to School webinar series. So we always like to shout out our Colorado partners. It includes links to tools, resources, worksheets, and has heavy emphasis on equity. And so some of you might be familiar with this framework already. So one of the parts of this framework is about partnerships and partnering with other organizations to build your community relationships as a part of your program and community engagement practice. And so in the spirit of partnership, we're going to be talking about a very specific partnership today, which is partnering with academic institutions, colleges, universities, and I'll talk a little bit about partnering with cultural institutions as well later on in the presentation. So I wanted to start with a quick poll just to see where you all are with partnering with colleges and universities. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll. And what I'd like to know is, have you partnered with a college or university on Safe Routes to School projects or a general Safe Routes project, transportation project? So go ahead and just jot that down. Just a simple yes or no. Have you partnered with a college or university or not? So give people a moment to answer the question. Right, we have almost everyone here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. So it looks like a majority of you who are on today have not partnered with a college or university on a Safe Routes program, which is great. So hopefully you'll get some ideas for what those partnerships can look like during today's session. And there are actually a few of you who have partnered with colleges and universities. So I'm curious, for those of you who have had these types of partnerships, what have you worked on? What types of partners, what types of projects have you done together? What have those partnerships looked like? So if you want to, just jot down in the chat, if you are somebody who's worked with a college or university on a Safe Routes project, I'm just curious what you all did. Was it research? Was it evaluation? Was it just having people volunteer for a project or an event? So anybody who might want to add details into the chat, I'd love to hear what those types of partnerships have looked like for you all. So go ahead and give people a moment to do that. Okay, so I see some people in the chat are saying, let's see, local college football team volunteer to attend bike to school events. That's great. Not safe routes, but have built greenways through several university campuses as part of a regional greenway system. Yes, and we'll talk about how colleges and universities also care about safe routes, about being able to walk and roll near or around campus. Conducting evaluation and research, some other evaluation projects, having students help lead walk audits. Yes. Let's see, somebody worked on a project called Cycle Atlanta at Georgia Tech. Evaluation and research, great. So you all are kind of, talking about some of the partnership examples we'll be exploring today. Basically, there are lots of ways to partner with colleges and universities. And I hope, again, for those of you who haven't done this, you'll get some ideas for what you can do in your projects moving forward. And so I also had one last question before we kind of dive in bit deeper into this topic, just about what type of support you need for your Safe Routes to School program or whatever project you're working on. So I'll go ahead and launch this poll. One second. Okay. So what type of support do you need for your Safe Routes to School program? So is it data and evaluation? Is it grant support? Is it volunteers? A few of you talked about volunteers. I'm getting volunteers from colleges and universities, research, general program design, documenting events. Maybe it's all of the above, which is fine. If you have anything else that's not on this list, add that to the chat as well. But I'm just curious, thinking about what these types of partnerships could look like. What types of support do you really need in your program right now? So I'll give this another moment, let you all put your ideas into the poll, and then we will continue. Okay, take about 10 more seconds. All right, so we will go ahead and close this one out. So as far as what you all are looking for, we see a bit of a range. So data and evaluation is a big one, usually volunteers and event support, a lot of support needed for grants and funding. That's another big area that people, kind of struggle with sometimes, and colleges and universities can help with that. Research, we have people looking for some program design or product development, and then even a little bit of support on social media or event documentation, taking photos, videos, things like that. So that's great. It's nice to know what you all are looking for. And the really good thing is that no matter what it is that you're looking for, colleges and universities can actually help with a lot of those things, whether it's a research project or an evaluation project or volunteering at an event or helping to develop a new program or product. There are a lot of ways that colleges and universities can help you and support your Safe Routes program or project. So again, thinking about support that you all might need or how an academic institution can help, this is just a very small list of possible support that you could get, whether it's data and evaluation, research. We've seen some great GIS mapping projects come out of university and college partnerships, event support. So people mentioned in the chat, having a football team, or maybe it's a fraternity or sorority or another student group come and volunteer at a, at a Safe Routes to School event, documenting an event. So people who might have, photo or video skills or graphic design skills, that's always super helpful. Grants and funding, being able to put a Safe Routes project into a grant that a university is working on, so that kind of takes the grant writing responsibility off of you. That's always super helpful. Community engagement, so just, generally, talking with community members about Safe Routes to School and Safe Routes projects. All of those are things that a college or university can really help with. And thinking about, why you'd want to partner with an academic institution. So I think a lot of the reasons, are pretty clear, and you all probably know this, but this is just another way to increase your program's resource, increase access to funding. I mentioned earlier that colleges might have, grants that you could be a part of or funding available for a Safe Routes project or to support a Safe Routes project. It also helps you engage new community members, both people who are, like a part of that institution, or just having other people to engage community members in your Safe Routes project. So lots of opportunities for expanding your Safe Routes base. It also helps expand your area of expertise. So I know that for me, like data and evaluation, that is not my area of expertise at all, but I know that there are people who are working at colleges and universities who do have that area of expertise. So they could bring that into a partnership. It can also help you explore innovative ideas. Oftentimes colleges and universities are, really up to date on, what's not only what's now, but what's next, right? So what are those new innovative techniques for walking and rolling, whether it's, GIS mapping or technical urbanism project or some other sort of evaluation tool. They can really bring that to the table as well. And of course, just having that increased support for Safe Routes to School. So some colleges and universities might not be familiar with Safe Routes to School, as a program. And so having these partnerships can really help, bring them on board and increase that support for the overall Safe Routes movement. The other important thing that's, we should point out is that college students and, and staff, they care about active transportation too. So, people want, opportunities to be physically active. A lot of, students, especially young people, are really are really invested in climate justice, thinking about some of the climate benefits for safe routes to school and having more walking and biking infrastructure and a walking and biking and rolling culture is also related to climate justice. Accessible transportation and transit options, again, impacts colleges and universities as well. Even just overall mental health and well-being, having those opportunities to be able to, walk and roll and be physically active with, fellow students, with peers, with staff. That's something that colleges and universities also care about, that social connectedness piece. And also, the cost of transportation, and walking and rolling, not having to, spend a lot of money, on gas or driving around, being able to offer those walking and rolling options is really important. So same thing that we talk about in our safe routes to school world. I think that colleges and universities, and those communities really care about some of the same things. So thinking about what these partnerships can look like, and again, you all put a lot of examples in the chat box, just a few other ideas what these can look like. Evaluating the effectiveness of a walking school bus program or another initiative you might be working on. We know that evaluation is one of the 6 E's. It's one of the 6 E's that we often get a lot of questions about and that people struggle with. So can a college or university help with that evaluation piece, help collect some of the data and analyze it, and help with getting those evaluation tools in place. It could also be piloting something like a traffic safety app, which I'll talk about a little bit later, or designing a GIS map of safe school routes. Maybe that's something that you, as a safe routes to school coordinator, might have the capacity to do, but a college student, might be able to, have those GIS skills and put together a nice safe routes to school map. Volunteering, we talked about volunteering at Walk and Roll to School Day, Bike and Roll to School Day. I think that having, more hands on deck, more volunteers is never a bad thing. Writing safe routes to a grant proposal, even just like sharing the latest reports and research around transportation, around physical activity, maybe around the relationship between physical activity and mental health. Again, maybe you don't have the bandwidth to do a whole research project, but a student or staff member might be able to provide those resources. So lots of ways that this can look. And so again, when you think about your own program priorities, whether it's health and well-being, curriculum development, even engineering improvements, program evaluation, engagement, advancing equity, climate justice, whatever your priority is, there's probably some sort of link that you can connect to. You can connect to somebody who's working in a college or university. And so when you think about your program priorities, that'll actually help you determine who you should reach out to. So, schools are large and have lots of different departments. And so if you have a very specific need or program focus area, you might want to start, initially by reaching out to that specific department that can, that is related to your focus area. So if you're working on, if your, main focus is physical activity or health and nutrition, maybe the public health department at a local college or university could be, kind of like your first point of entry. If it's infrastructure, maybe talking to an engineering department or an urban planning department. If you're looking for, educational materials, curriculum development, or even volunteers for an event, maybe the education department and getting people who are, learning how to be, teachers and educators, could they come in and help with that, some of that curriculum support, or volunteering at a safe routes event. Colleges and universities also have, research and data centers. I'll talk about one a little bit later. But if you're looking for, very specific research or data request, is there a data or research center you can reach out to? There are also service learning organizations and fraternities and sororities and just other student groups that might be, available to, either volunteer at an event or volunteer time to, take photos or prep materials or hand out giveaways. Again, there are lots of things that these groups can do, but I think that really, kind of like tailoring your ask to that priority area that you have, and then finding that specific, department or group that's aligned with that priority would be a good way to get started. I also wanted to highlight university hospitals. I know that here in DC, I've had some partnerships with our GW hospital here working on some Safe Kids initiatives as well. So thinking about, university hospitals, they're also places to help with, they might be able to pull health and safety data, those health and wellness programs related to food and nutrition, physical activity. I've worked with a lot of like youth trauma centers, as a part of Vision Zero work. So university hospitals are also a great resource to tap into, and also a lot of safety programs, whether it's Safe Kids coalitions, helmet giveaways, seatbelt safety. So that's just another avenue that I wanted to point out when it comes to working with colleges and universities. University hospitals can be really great partners as well for safe routes programs. So again, first step is actually just determining your ask. So when you're reaching out to college or university, what are you asking for? What types of support do you need? Is it data collection? Is it evaluation? Is it developing a specific product or developing curriculum? Is it action planning? So how can you work with a college or university to create a safe routes to school action plan? Maybe you want to, collect some data first to put into your action plan or to help inform your plan. A university partner can help with that. Is it community engagement, volunteers, program materials, or equipment? So what is that ask? And having that concrete ask is really important. It's also important for you to think about, just not what the college or university can do for you, but what you can provide for them. So you also bring something to the partnership, whether it's people, you have access to students and families. And, oftentimes if you're, doing a research project that requires you to, work with, human participants, that access to students and families and that connection to schools is really important. So that's something that you can bring to these partnerships, just, access to students, to families, to schools, to be a part of some of these, research or evaluation projects. Service learning hours. There are some, classes that require, students to participate in a number of service learning hours. Again, volunteering for a local, Safe Routes event or program can help contribute to those service learning hours. Also just real world experience, right? You need to have a number of hours, out in the field or working with people. Safe Routes can, offer some of that real world experience, that real world practice that people who are studying different subjects can incorporate into their into their work. And you also offer just safe routes school expertise. Like I mentioned before, there are some people who aren't really familiar with safe routes to school. So you are kind of bringing that whole, the knowledge of safe routes to school. And I'm even imagining, for, I guess, any student, but especially the students might be working in, an engineering program or an urban planning program, being able to know about safe routes to school and what it is can also help them make different choices when they actually, are working on, planning projects or engineering projects once they graduate. So they'll already have that, safe routes to school, in mind and, consider it as a priority when they're putting together their own projects. And lastly, safe routes to school is just a lot of fun. So if you're, if you're a student or a university or college staff member, just looking to do something that's fun and engaging and meaningful, I think that getting involved in safe routes to school could be a great avenue for that. So yeah, not only are you asking for something, but you're also bringing something to these partnerships as well. And just a few, things to keep in mind as you're starting these partnerships. So of course, make sure that your goals are aligned. So like I mentioned, as you're determining your ask, really think about, who you're going to approach in order to get that support and making sure that you all are, kind of making sure that you're on the same page when it comes to what this partnership looks like and what you'll be doing. You also need to create a formal agreement if necessary. Maybe you're, doing a large, research project or developing a tool or writing a grant together. So just making sure that you kind of, go through that formal agreement process, whatever that looks like for your program and your, the college or university, just making sure that paperwork is done and the formal agreement is in place is really important if that's something that's necessary. Also communicate with your schools and your other partners. So I know that, a lot of schools, obviously for, very, for very, different reasons, want to make sure that they know, if you have volunteers on campus or if you have people who are coming into the school building from, outside the school community, making sure that the school is aware of the partnership and who will be on campus, who will be working with students, not only for the, for the safety of the students in the school community, but it's also just, common courtesy to communicate, different partnerships with the schools that you're working with. So make sure that like your actual schools are on board as well, but that, this is happening and involve them as a, involve them in the partnership process. Also keep in mind that academic institutions also have limited resources and capacity. So, this is not a situation where, there's just, pools of money and pools of volunteers, but, while they do have resources to offer, it's not unlimited. So just keep that in mind when thinking about what you're asking for and how, managing those expectations. Also remember that community colleges and technical schools, vocational schools are also great partners. So make sure you're reaching out to a wide range of students and staff members who could possibly help at your event. And then, lastly, it just doesn't hurt to ask. I've actually talked to some people who work at colleges and universities who say, I'd love to work with a Safe Routes to School program. Like if somebody asked me to come partner on a research project or an evaluation project, like, I'd love to do so. So even just like making that initial ask, even if you don't know where it's going to lead, it doesn't hurt. And there are people who actually do want to get involved and who also do need that real life experience of working with young people or working on a evaluation project on the ground, or an engineering or planning project on the ground. So I think that you really have a lot to offer each other. So I'm going to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions and check the chat box before we continue on. Okay. So somebody asked, what are the best practices to reach out to the student communities? We have a lot of staff members that are receptive to our efforts, but a hard time mobilizing students and include them in our efforts to promote cycling on their own campus. So I assume this question is about best practices to reach out to student communities on college campuses. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me in the chat box. I'm curious if there's anybody who wants to respond in the chat about effective ways to reach out to student communities. I've often found that, whether it's actually with, high school students or college students, that students reaching out to students is pretty effective. So if there's, a really engaged student group or even a really engaged student staff member that's really, connected to the student community, faculty member, I would suggest, that could be a good avenue. So kind of thinking about who's already connected to the student community, whether it's other students themselves or faculty that work really closely with some of those groups. So if anybody else has any other suggestions, feel free to drop them in the chat box as well. And I see one more question. I work for a university. How do we proactively engage with our city to ask for a collaboration on projects? This is from Courtney. So I would say that if you're at a university and you want to collaborate on a Safe Routes project, as I mentioned in my last slide, and I said it doesn't hurt to ask, that goes both ways. So if you're at a university and you want to, collaborate on, a planning project or an engineering project, I always say that it doesn't hurt to ask. And of course, this depends on, the dynamics of your city, of your community. I don't know how receptive like your local agencies are to, collaboration. But I would just figure out what project you're interested in working on and then contacting that local agency and see if they can, if you can have a conversation, talk a bit about what types of projects you want to, you want to work on. I'll also say that local agency staff who are also, at limited capacity would also probably, love a collaboration with somebody else who can offer resources or support. So I think that, we're all kind of in the same boat as far as, needing to expand our bandwidth and needing more support. So if you can come in and you can offer something to somebody who, is kind of, strapped for time and resources, that's great. So again, I would say it does not hurt to ask. All right, and thank you all for adding your ideas in the chat. I see people have been, putting in some other ideas as far as who to reach out to. Sustainability offices, yep, definitely a great idea. Student athletes, fraternities, sororities, great. Geography and environmental science, yes, another great avenue for, creating these partnerships. Different student clubs, awesome. So keep those ideas flowing in the chat box and we'll continue. So talking about some very specific partnerships between colleges and universities and Safe Routes programs, I wanted to highlight a few today. And again, we're like just starting to dive into this topic, so I'm sure that there are many more that I'm not aware of, but this is like a short list of what these partnerships can look like. So the first one is actually something that I'm involved in, which is called the Road to Zero project, which is happening here in DC. It's a grant that we got from the National Safety Coalition and their Road to Zero movement. So I've been working in collaboration with the Washington Area Bicyclist Association, which is our bike advocacy organization here in the DC metro region. And we actually partnered with Howard University's Transportation and Research Data Center. So I mentioned research and data centers earlier. This is a great example of how to partner with a research and data center. So Howard University, they actually manage the crash data for the entire city of DC, which I didn't realize until we started this partnership. So we've been working with them and DC Public Schools to create a near-miss reporting, a near-miss crash reporting app. So it'll basically be an app for young people to use where, if they're out walking around their neighborhood, biking in their neighborhood, and they either are, experience a near miss themselves or witness a near miss. So maybe they're, biking and have to, swerve out of the bike lane because a car is coming, or they're in a crosswalk and a car, almost hits them. They have to jump out of the way. Howard wants to make sure that they can actually get that data so that they can, give it back to DDOT in order to make those, street safety improvements. But we need to make sure that we know where those crashes or near miss crashes are actually happening. So we've partnered together on this project to identify some priority intersections in priority areas here in DC to collect data around near misses in order to develop this crash reporting app. So we've distributed surveys, held focus groups, did a community event in the middle school, and all that information will actually be used to help create this crash reporting app. Now, I'm not an app development expert. I'm not a data expert, neither is WABA, but our partners at Howard University, that's what they do. Their whole center is about transportation, traffic research and data. So they're the ones who can really help, collect the data, analyze the data, take that data and turn it into an actual app that young people can use. So this is an example of a way that a Safe Routes program can partner with a research or data center in order to create, an app in this case, but a product that can actually be used to help improve safety. And again, this would not be possible without partners at Howard because that's not my area of expertise. So they can really bring that to the partnership and hopefully, create something that, young people can use to help report where near miss crashes are happening in their community. So that is one, kind of data example of a Safe Routes and university partnership. Another one that I worked on also here in the DC area is a partnership with Discover Traffic Gardens and George Mason University, which is right outside DC in Northern Virginia. So this was a project from a few years ago. Those of you who might be familiar with Discover Traffic Gardens and Panula, this was her traffic garden project here in DC. And George Mason, their College of Education and Human Development, they came in as research partners. They wanted to see, do some research on pre-K bike education and how, early childhood students were using the traffic garden. So the partners here, again, were Discover Traffic Gardens, George Mason, Safe Routes Partnership, DC Public Schools, and the purpose was to do some bike education research around traffic gardens. So there were 2 traffic gardens installed here in DC and 2 public schools. George Mason helped develop some of those early childhood bike education materials that classroom teachers could use as they're, teaching their kids how to use the traffic garden, just general bike skills. So we incorporated, the traffic garden piece in that classroom instruction. And George Mason really helped with, organizing some of those parent focus groups, doing student observations, and really evaluating, how the traffic garden worked for early childhood students. So again, not my area of expertise, but George Mason could come in and, offer their research, expertise and data skills to really evaluate the effectiveness of this, traffic garden project. So those of you who I know many people are working on traffic garden projects right now. And the question is always like, well, how do I evaluate this? Like, how do I know if it's working? A university partner can actually come and help with some of that evaluation. So in this case, it was early childhood. Maybe you're working with a middle school or a high school or an elementary school. Can a university come in and help with some of that evaluation, whether it's, a traffic garden or a walking school bus program or another project you might be piloting. University partners are great for getting that evaluation piece done. And that evaluation piece can also help determine if you can do future projects. So showing that, yeah, like this program actually was effective. This traffic garden was effective. So we need to, fund more traffic gardens because they're an effective way of keeping kids safe and teaching bike skills. So even as you think about, expanding your program and getting more resources, having that evaluation and that research can really help you, advocate for more funding and more projects related to safe routes to school. And Rick, I don't know if you're on here. I haven't seen you, but if anybody wants to know more about that project, I'm happy to share as well. And then for our Colorado partners, so I think that some of you might have participated in our Safe Routes to School Summit last fall, but we had a really great data and research session. And one of the featured speakers in that session was a PhD student. Her name is Darcy Varney Kitching. She's a PhD candidate in geography, planning, and design at University of Colorado, Denver. And so she worked with 2 local school districts on actually a pretty large research project, really thinking about safe routes to school and equity. So she partnered with the school districts, transportation professionals, students, caregivers, community members, and safe routes to school programs in 2 school districts, Boulder Valley and St. Vrain. And they actually did a number of things as a part of, this partnership between Safe Routes and Darcy's research work. So she conducted interviews. They did some community engagement activities, a map-share with different survey questions about student travel experiences. And the real focus was thinking about whose voices are not often heard. So who are we not hearing from? Who's not participating in our programs? Who do we need to, connect with? Who's most impacted by, unsafe conditions related to safe walking and rolling. So this was kind of like an ongoing data collection process in collaboration between Darcy, who was like leading this research project, community members and partners. And the whole purpose is really about collecting that data to inform the Safe Routes to School programs. So, once we kind of understand what, student travel experiences are like, the barriers that students are facing, how can you then take that information and incorporate it into a Safe Routes to School program? So yeah, this was a really great research project, very thoughtful, very thorough. If anybody wants more information on Darcy and her work, she's also great, and I'm sure I'd be happy to share. But this is just another way that you can really help partner with a college or university to collect a lot of data to then inform your future programming. This example is from Cal Poly Pomona Center for Community Engagement. This was a service learning mini grant that a faculty member got in order to do some safe routes to school mapping and creating a safe routes to school program in the elementary school. So this was actually a really small grant. Like I mentioned before, service learning is another avenue for creating partnerships with colleges and universities. So in this case, there was a small service learning grant. Students worked on creating some safe routes to school maps and actually organizing a safe routes to school program at an elementary school. So even like some of the smaller service learning grants or mini grants can be great opportunities for colleges and universities to get involved in safe routes programs. So it doesn't have to be like this huge research project or a huge evaluation program. It can be, smaller scale as well. So again, it really just depends on what you need and what your focus area is. Another great example, California-based, is San Jose State University is actually doing a lot of really great work related to safe routes to school. In their urban planning program, they actually incorporate safe routes to school into their graduate research projects. So in this case, there's a partnership between the urban planning program, San Jose schools, City of San Jose, community members, and their safe routes to school program. And linked in the slide deck is their full report for this program, which I highly recommend you all take a look at because it really goes deep into what this partnership looked like. But basically, San Jose State University wanted to make sure that their graduate research students had, real world experience working with community members and talking to people on the ground. So they did site visits, they did safe routes to school maps, community meetings, they did surveys. They had, it was a parent task force related to safe routes to school. There was walking school bus event. So they kind of got the whole scope of what a safe routes to school program program looks like. And again, this was mutually beneficial. So grad students, they really got that on the ground experience of working with communities. And again, these are urban planning students. So, as they graduate and start going out and, are being professional planners, they have this experience of working with safe routes to school so that they can start, planning or thinking about safe routes to school, in their own work. So that, that on the ground real world experience is really helpful. And again, for the community as well, they're able to connect with, local students, meet new people, garner some more support for safe routes to school or for walking and biking. So it's like this really nice relationship between, community members and the university. And again, I'd highly recommend checking out that full report because it goes really into a lot more detail about how this partnership started, what it looked like, and the success that they experienced. So that's another really great example of university partnership. Another Colorado example from Colorado Mesa University. This one is a Safe Routes to School project as well. I think this is funded by a DDOT grant a few years ago. So in this case, the Safe Routes to School program partnered with Colorado Mesa University in order to create a website and mobile app that included a map of the closest and safest school routes. So again, not a lot of, I know I'm not an app developer, maybe some of you are, but working with a partner, university partner who can actually, develop an app and is, used to GIS mapping and app development, that can be another, great resource that you can incorporate into your Safe Routes to School program. And this is an actual, mobile app that's available for people to use. So you can download the app and it'll show you, the Safe Routes to School. And the university really helped with that, that piece of actually creating and developing the, the mobile app. So another great example out of Colorado, kind of I think the person I talked to who worked on this was from Grand Junction. So I don't know if there are any people from Grand Junction or that part of Colorado on the call. But yeah, this is another really great example of a partnership with a university. And Nicole, I saw you on earlier, so I'm going to shout out Atlanta and the work that you all are doing with Georgia State University. So Atlanta Safe Routes to School program, they're working on some action planning with a few schools over the next year or so. And so they'll be partnering with Georgia State University on some data collection, listening sessions, surveys, some focus groups, and public engagement sessions. So again, Safe Routes to School, their program in Atlanta, there's one person managing the Safe Routes to School program. So having those partners, especially university partners, can really help, expand what's possible in their Safe Routes to School work. And it's funny because when I asked like, how did this partnership get started? Nicole said, well, I just asked them. And, I know that there are some already built relationships with GSU. But again, sometimes just asking and saying, hey, could we partner on this? I need support with this. How can we work with each other? Sometimes that really is all that it takes to at least get those partnerships, started and off the ground. So again, when you think about, your, partnerships and getting started, just ask. The worst people can say is no, or now it's not the right time. But I do think that just having that initial ask is a great way to, to get started and see what those possibilities are as far as starting these partnerships. So again, I want to pause for a moment, see if there are any other questions. Again, this was just a small sampling of what these partnerships can look like. There are many, many more, I'm sure. But that's just a little glimpse into what a Safe Routes University partnership could look like. I'm going to dig back into the chat here, just see if there are any other questions. Let's see. Oh, thank you to the person who explained what a traffic garden is. Yes, traffic gardens are like, it's like a little mini streetscape that really teaches kids how to ride a bike, how to navigate a street. I'm happy to share some examples in my follow-up materials as well, including Fanula's Discover Traffic Gardens website. I can put that together for you as well. Any other questions? All righty, so we will go ahead and keep moving. So I also wanted to shout out a few partnership opportunities, beyond colleges and universities. We also know that cultural partnerships are another really great avenue for expanding your resource and expertise bank when it comes to safe routes to school. So I did want to highlight a few other opportunities to partner with different with different institutions might be in your community. So I have one more poll that I wanted to launch here, and I'm curious to know what types of cultural partners you've worked with. So a cultural partner might include a library, museum, an arts organization, a local fair or festival, a performance venue, or maybe something else that's just not on this list. So if you want to take a moment and share a bit about what other partners you've worked with outside of colleges and universities, thinking about our arts and cultural partners. So I'll give you all a moment to do that. And take about 10 seconds. If you say other, please add to the chat what that partnership was. I'm curious. All right, so we'll go ahead and end this poll. So it looks like we've had a bunch of people partnering with libraries. Awesome. I will talk about that a bit more in a moment. Some museum partnerships, which I'm very curious about what that's looked like in the Safe Routes world. A few arts organizations, local fairs and festivals, great performance venues. I'm going to go ahead and see if anybody put anything else in the chat. AmeriCorps, yes, great opportunity for partnerships. That could be like a whole other webinar partnering with AmeriCorps. So thanks for Isabel for putting that in. Community centers, youth organizations, parks and rec. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So I first want to talk about, partnering with potential partnerships with museums or cultural organizations, or museums or, art centers, arts organizations. So as you're thinking about, community engagement, whether it's, hosting an event, maybe you want to have a community meeting or a focus group, or just kind of, change up how you're doing things. A museum or an art space could be a great space for, a meeting or, like I said, a focus group or a community event, or a walk and roll event. Maybe you want to do a bike rodeo, kind of somewhere new. There are also a lot of new and emerging arts and transportation projects, whether it's asphalt art, so like those painted crosswalks or curb cuts, art on transit, creative placemaking. A lot of that really shows the relationship between arts and transportation. And so involving your museum partners, art centers, arts organizations can be a great way to incorporate art into your Safe Routes to School programs. There are also some great grant opportunities around this, whether it's a National Endowment for the Arts. They have their Our Town grants, which are kind of placemaking grants that incorporate planning and public space and placemaking into different communities. So that's a great grant opportunity. There are also like smaller projects too. Even some of like the tactical urbanism projects where you might do a creative crosswalk or a creative bike lane. There's a lot of opportunities to have those types of partnerships between arts and transportation. So I just wanted to highlight that opportunity. Also libraries. So I did not realize that libraries were so involved in Safe Routes to School or active transportation projects, but I am learning a lot. Noah, I think I saw you on earlier, and you have shown me so much about taught me so much about arts, about libraries and Safe Routes projects. So basically, a lot of libraries are actually expanding their programming to include health and wellness activities, whether that's older adult walking programs, youth programs, community gardens, bike repair stations, bike workshops, story walks, even things like climate justice and climate justice events, and how that relates to safe walking and rolling. Libraries are actually doing a lot when it comes to improving the health and well-being of a community, and Safe Routes can actually be a part of that. So there's been a lot of increased interest in Safe Routes to School programs, and actually safe routes to the actual library. We know that libraries are often located, next to a school, near a school, or maybe it's a downtown area or another space where a lot of people are actually coming to. So people want to make sure that you can actually access the library safely. There's also an increase in interest around transit and infrastructure projects, from the library community. And libraries also offer a really nice, like, neutral gathering space, whether it's for a community meeting, a forum, a public information session. So all of these links in this on this slide right here link to a different example of how library is, doing a safe routes project or a transit project or an infrastructure project. There are many, and they're happening in small libraries or really big libraries as well. So this is another really great resource for you all to tap into. And as far as how that actually gets started, again, sometimes just start by asking. Librarians actually do want to help with a lot of these projects. So I also learned there's something called a community outreach librarian. I'd never heard of that term before, but it is a role that might be, that somebody might have at your library. And these are actually librarians who, like, their purpose is to do community outreach and engagement. If any of you have kind of seen those book bikes or those book mobiles, community outreach librarians are often a part of those projects and, kind of like help manage the bike mobile. But they, librarians can really do a lot. Whether it's promoting events or activities, helping with flyers, sharing information, promoting different initiatives. Again, I mentioned that the book bike, and I'll if you click on that link, you'll see some cool pictures of what those book bikes look like. But it's basically like a bike that has an attachment with it that has a bunch of books. It actually is almost like a biking library. Super cool, very mobile, and a great way to connect transportation and reading and literacy. Libraries also have a lot of nimbleness to try new things. So, there might be things that you might not be able to do in a school, but a library can do it. Also, we know that a lot of schools are just tapped out. School admin, they're at limited capacity, school staff, they're at limited capacity. So knowing that schools might not be able to do as much these days, libraries can really help kind of supplement some of that, engagement or that programming that schools just don't have the capacity to do right now. So libraries are great places to explore that. There are also a lot of opportunities in rural communities and small communities. So again, there are projects that are happening all across the country in tiny libraries or big libraries. Oftentimes the smaller libraries also have a lot of, freedom and flexibility around projects they're being involved in and what they're doing. So if you're in a small community, check out your local library. And we also have a really great blog post on our website that has a lot of other information about how to partner with libraries, what this looks like, and I'll make sure that's linked in our follow-up resources as well. And just another pitch for libraries. So Noah, who I mentioned before, is from UNC Greensboro. There's a program called Let's Move in Libraries, which has a lot of really great resources that support programs related to healthy living and physical activity in libraries, whether it's walking, biking, music, movement, dance, story walk projects, which is basically where you print out a children's book story and walk and place it along a walking route. So as you're walking, you can actually like read a story. A lot of communities are doing these story walk programs these days. So there are lots of ways to work with your local library to increase walking and encourage more walking and biking and rolling. So yeah, if you have not done so, connect with your local library. I'm sure they would like to help with your Safe Routes program. And again, it does not hurt to ask. And lastly, you talked about, I mentioned earlier, the festivals and fairs. These are another great place for, pop-up demonstrations, safety demonstrations, meeting new partners, connecting with people you don't normally hear from. Some people don't go to, school events or just, or maybe they don't go to the library, but they'll go to, a local community festival or a street fair. So can that be an avenue to talk about safe routes to school, hand out materials, do some demonstration projects. This is an example from Indio, California, which is where Coachella is. I guess that just happened, wrapped up a few days ago. They got a grant from SCAG to do a mini pop-up demonstration to encourage more walking and biking, and it also featured artwork from local students. So they had an event called Indio Streets or Treats, which was a Halloween themed event last fall, where they had a few different pop-up demonstrations that showed different safety elements. And so the community could come and celebrate Halloween and test out some new infrastructure. This is an example of an artistic crosswalk that was out at that event. So again, great opportunity to combine a local festival with a Safe Routes project. And then this is an event that I did a few years ago at the Taste of Harvest Festival here in DC. So again, this was like an already planned community event celebrating fall. And we created a pop-up, we created an artistic crosswalk at that event. It was great because like I didn't have to plan anything. This was an event that was already happening. I asked if I could come and be a part of it. We talked about safety. We talked about making it easier for people to walk and roll around. We created this artistic crosswalk, and then we had a safety demonstration at the local library. So again, those cultural partnerships, those street festivals, those street fairs, those events that are just kind of like happen every year in a community can be a great way to, yeah, just, you know, reach new people and talk about safe routes to school. And, you know, the good thing about those events is that oftentimes it's already something that's, you know, planned. And so you just kind of, you know, figure out how you can already fit into, you know, that established plan and routine and take some of that planning pressure off of your plate. So that is almost, let's see, about 5 minutes left. So I'll see if there are any last questions. I have a few final announcements as well. But this is just a really, again, general overview of how to partner with colleges, universities, and cultural partners. So again, there's so many examples of what these partnerships can look like. This was just a very small sampling, but we wanted to give you all an idea of things that you could do as you're thinking about what these partnerships could look like for your Safe Routes programs. So I'm going to just take another quick look in the chat box here. And again, if you are putting links to the chat box, don't worry about it. We will collect all of these links and we will share them out afterwards. So if you missed something, that is totally okay. Is doing some love for library staff. Yes, libraries lending bikes, e-bikes. Yes, libraries are doing a lot when it comes to biking and bike education. So again, if you haven't reached out to your local library, I highly suggest you do so. I know that Bike to School Day is coming up in a few days. It might be too late to get your library on board, but you know, never say never. You never know. Somebody could, you know, come to Bike and Roll to School Day event with, you know, a bike mobile or, you know, some bike and reading resources. So, you know, there are many opportunities to meet with your and connect with your local library. And I'm going to check the Q&A box here. Dustin asked, are there any universities developing safe routes to their campus? Obviously, this is not the focus of Safe Routes to School, but still an issue. I'm not familiar of any like safe routes to a specific campus project. I'm not aware of any. There might be. But like I mentioned earlier, I think that, you know, the same things we talk about in Safe Routes to School when it comes to just wanting safer you know, places to walk and roll. Colleges and universities and students and staff, they want the same thing. So they want to be able to, you know, walk and bike and roll, you know, safely to campus. And, you know, I'd imagine that also could be a nice entry point for starting those types of partnerships, you know, so saying, well, I care about safe walking and rolling and you care about safe walking and rolling. So how can we work on this together? You know, how can I support something that you're working on? How can you support something that I'm working on when it comes to safe routes to school? So yeah, I haven't seen any, you know, like safe routes to school programs on a college level, but I imagine there are plenty of initiatives about making it safer for people to walk and roll around college campuses because it's just something that lots of people care about. So if anybody has those examples, feel free to put them in the chat box, but I have not seen anything specific. All right, so if there are not any questions, I wanted to do a few final announcements. So first off, this is our, like I mentioned, this is our Colorado Safe Routes to School webinar series. So we will be taking a break for the summer and we'll be back in the fall with a new series of webinars. So thank you to those of you who've joined us over the spring for these 3 sessions, and we'll have 3 more sessions coming up in the fall. So stay tuned for that. So we will see you soon when it comes to Colorado. We also have our Walk, Ride, and Roll webinar series, which is like so hard to say, Walk, Ride, and Roll webinar series. Our next, last webinar for that series will be on Wednesday, May 10th. And we'll be talking about youth engagement. So really engaging high school students in safe routes to school projects. It'll be pretty similar to this, where we'll, you know, give some general tips and strategies and then feature some really great youth-led safe routes projects from across the country. So please do check out join us for that webinar on Wednesday, May 10th. And I'll send out the registration link for that one in my follow-up email. And lastly, last year we hosted our first Safe Routes to School virtual summit, which took place on Zoom events. We are hosting another Safe Routes to School virtual summit this fall, this October 24th to 26th. We will open registration on May 1st. Registration is opening a bit early this year because if there are any of you who have grant funding or other funds you need to spend down before the end of the fiscal year, we wanted to give you the opportunity to do that and register in advance, but there's plenty of time to register for this event. So it'll be pretty similar to last year's summit. We'll have some, webinar sessions, networking sessions, and it's just a way for us to kind of gather as a Safe Routes community virtually. For those of you who are wondering about an in-person conference, that's something that we are definitely thinking about and exploring, and we will definitely share news with you as soon as we have it. But we're super excited to have our virtual summit again this year on Zoom events. So again, more information is coming next week, and again over the next few months, we're really excited to have another fun virtual gathering like we had last year. So more to come on the Safe Routes to School Summit for 2023. And with that, I think we're at about time. So I will go ahead and wish you all a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being so generous with sharing your resources, your expertise, your energy. I really, really appreciate it. Again, this is recorded. I'll send out the recording, the slides, all the great resources you put into the chat box. I'll make sure that that gets to you too. So thank you all so much. And we will hopefully see you on the 10th for our high school webinar, and also have a great Bike and Roll to School Day next week if y'all are celebrating. So we will see you then, and have a good one, everybody.